Hello, this is Nathaniel. I'm presenting a Google Slides presentation on G.K. Chesterton, focusing primarily on his kind of short story, The Absence of Mr. Glass. Here we go. G.K. Chesterton was a writer for the Illustrated London News. He wrote over 4,000 newspaper essays for them, also for other newspaper organizations. He started writing newspaper essays before he started writing some 200 short stories, 100 books, hundreds of poems. We're not sure exactly how many, but there's over 100, few hundred. 4 plays, 5 novels. So after reading one of his short stories, for example, The Absence of Mr. Glass, which is the story I personally read, you can look back on his newspaper essays and find out why he wrote his stories the way he did, and his opinion on how a mystery story should be written, also its significance. In my essay about G.K. Chesterton, I used ambiguous circumstance, and his use of it in the short story, The Absence of Mr. Glass. I talked about how not only is it a plot device, but it's also a jab at scientists. Mr. Chesterton does this by having the main character, a detective, and the main character and the detective, who thinks that Mrs. McNabb, being a Celtic and Catholic, would find a supernatural explanation for what's happening. But the detective finds it completely normal that him being a man of science and a rationalist, he makes up a human and swiftly kills him off right away, completely in his imagination, and believes this person to have existed and be real, even though he didn't, which is almost as, kind of out there as some of the supernatural things that Mrs. McNabb would have believed. When he wrote his short stories, he didn't only write them to give people a good time, or to earn money, or to immortalize himself through his work. He did it to provide social commentary. He chose to write detective stories because, in his words, not only is a detective story a perfectly legitimate form of art, but it has certain definite and real advantages against the public weal, where real means best or good, is the way that weal is used here. Not to mention that it was the most popular genre of book in the early 20th century, so more people would read his literature if he wrote mystery stories. G.K. Chesterton in modern media. Now, even though most Chesterton enthusiasts don't believe that he's given the popularity or influence that he deserves currently, in the school system and elsewhere, he's still been a large part of the 20th and 21st century's media. For example, the BBC first aired a TV show based on his books called The Complete Father Brown Stories in 2013, and will be starting to air its 6th season in late December of 2017, this year. One of the episodes was based on The Absence of Mr. Glass, along with many other short stories. There was also a show of the same name that ran for 1 season in 1974, but wasn't as popular, and a radio drama made in the 1940s. Not to mention that his books are still published and sold all around the world to this day. Now I'm going to show you a the trailer for the Complete Father Brown Stories.
Thank God you're here. G.K. Chesterton's almighty crime solver is back.
This house,
Mom?
is haunted.
With a mystery that's as spirited
I wanted to be told what to do. I'd be at home with my husband.
as it is sprightly.
Are you planning on giving an alibi to every man I interview?
Whenever a dash of devilment goes down, don't miss the new series of
Father Brown, I've heard so much about you.
Saturday, 7:30, ABC One.
G.K. Chesterton and Sir Conan Doyle. Instead of writing out my own paragraph, I found this quote that pretty well sums up exactly what I was going to say from Antonio Gramsci. So I'm just going to read that. Father Brown is a Catholic who pokes fun at the mechanical thought process of the Protestants, and the book is basically an apologia of the Roman Church as against the Anglican Church. Sherlock Holmes is the Protestant detective who finds the end of the criminal skein by starting from the outside, relying on science, on experimental method, on induction. Father Brown is the Catholic priest who, through the refined psychological experiences offered by confession and by the persistent activity of the Father's moral casuistry, though not neglecting science and experimentation, but relying especially on deduction and introspection, totally defeats Sherlock Holmes, makes him look like a pretentious little boy, shows up his narrowness and pettiness. Moreover, Chesterton is a great artist, while Sir Conan Doyle was a mediocre writer, even though he was knighted for literary merit. Thus, in Chesterton, there was a stylistic gap between the content, the detective story plot, and the form, and therefore a subtle irony with regard to the subject being dealt with, which renders these stories so delicious. Antonio Gramsci. G.K. Chesterton's peers. G.K. Chesterton was considered one of the elite intellectuals of his time, and would debate often with others such as George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells, Bertrand Russell, Clarence Drought, and Clarence Drought. And he won most times, most debates. He was also a good friend of H.G. Wells, and they would talk often and get together to write. G.K. Chesterton's influences were very impressive. G.K. Chesterton's writings had a G.K. Chesterton's writings had and continue to have a very large influence on people, and who have gone on to do great things. For example, after reading The Everlasting Man, C.S. Lewis became a Christian and wrote the Narnia series and many other books. Chesterton also influenced Mitchell Collins to lead the movement for Irish independence with his book The Napoleon of Notting Hill. And lastly, after reading an essay written by Charleston, published in the Illustrated London News, Mohandas Gandhi was inspired to lead the movement to end British colonial rule in India, which is incredible. Finally, G.K. Chesterton was one of the most knowledgeable people alive for his time, and wrote lots of really influential and insightful books. Not to mention, he would fight for the common man, so he was always in debates. His passion for mystery stories made him one of the best mystery writers of all time. And he knew how to make them engaging and still give a bigger picture that's just as relevant now as it was back when he wrote them. The end. That's my presentation.